Seeing the death of Patroclus, the Greek armies would rush to claim his body, fighting off the Trojans as they went. Bringing him back to their camp, Achilles would be distraught when he saw his best friend laying dead before him. Contemplating ending his own life, Achilles could not hold back his anguish, with his mother Thetis coming to comfort him. Seeing her son in such distress, Thetis would go to Olympus and retrieve a new set of armour from the forge of Hephaestus, placing it on Achilles when she returned. With his new armour equipped, the grief Achilles had felt would now turn to revenge, with the destruction of Hector and Troy the only things on his mind. Seeing the real Achilles now charging towards him, Hector would begin to run in fear, with him being chased around Troy's walls 3 times before he was eventually caught. Unable to run any further, Hector decided to make a final stand and fight Achilles with honour. Charging at him, Hector would draw his sword, but as he took his final swing, it would miss, with him falling down to the floor. Realising the end was near, Hector would refuse to beg for his life, and instead would only request one thing: that Achilles treat his body with respect, so his family could properly mourn his passing. But still enraged at the death of Patroclus, Achilles would plunge his spear into Hector's neck, bringing an end to his life. Tying Hector's legs to the back of his chariot, Achilles would drag his corpse around the city, parading his body for all to see, while Hector's entire family watched from the walls above. It was a sight too much for Hector's father, King Priam, to bear. As nightfall came, Priam would approach Achilles in his camp, begging at his feet for his son's body to be returned. Moved by the king's words that reminded him of his own grief after the death of Patroclus, Achilles would give in and allow Priam to take Hector's body. Arriving back in Troy, the entire city would gather to see Priam's son, mourning for the loss of their great hero. But none would feel the pain more than Hector's wife Andromache and his son Astyanax, who clung onto his body as it passed through Troy's sombre streets. With Hector's death, Homer would mark the end of the Iliad, but for the story of Troy, more tragedy was to come. With Hector now gone, all hope was lost within the city, and with Achilles closing in, it looked like the end was near. Slaughtering the Trojans one by one, he would make his way to the gates of Troy. But as he went to scale the city walls, he would feel a sharp and excruciating pain in his heel. For Paris, guided by the god Apollo, had shot Achilles with a poisoned arrow in the only mortal part of his body. Dropping to the floor and poison coursing through his veins, Achilles' skin would turn white as snow, with him taking his last and final breath. But Paris would not live long enough to enjoy his victory, for the Greeks, who had seen him shoot Achilles, would hunt him down and take their revenge. With their greatest heroes now gone, each side would fall into despair, especially the Greeks, who saw no way to penetrate Troy's great walls without the strength of Achilles. But there would be one Greek who did not give up hope, with Odysseus devising a cunning plan, a plan so genius that its story would echo throughout the ages. Constructing a giant wooden horse, Odysseus would hollow out the inside, making enough room for himself and a handful of Greece's best warriors to be hidden within. And so, when the next day dawned, the Trojans awoke to find a great horse outside their walls. Seeing the Greek camp dismantled and their ships sailing off into the horizon, a great cheer erupted throughout the city, celebrating that the war had come to an end. Mesmerized by its beauty and believing the horse to be a peace offering, the Trojans would decide to bring it within their walls. But there was one who was not fooled by the gift. Cassandra, claiming it was a trap, would urge the Trojans to burn the horse, but once again she was ignored, with the entire city laughing and ridiculing her for her insanity. But that night, when all were asleep, Odysseus, Menelaus, Diomedes and Ajax would begin to pour out of the horse. Killing the guards, they would open Troy's gates from within, before signalling with fire for the rest of the Greek fleet to return. The Trojans would awake to their city ablaze, with Greek warriors flooding through the streets, looting homes and slaughtering any remaining defenders. With his entire city burning before his eyes, Priam, the king of Troy, would meet his end, with Pyrrhus, the son of Achilles, plunging his dagger into the old man's defenceless body. Leaving the king's body amongst his fallen men, Pyrrhus would head to the royal chambers, where he would find Hector's wife and son. Taking Astyanax from his mother's arms, he would throw the infant to its death from the city's walls, before taking his mother Andromache into slavery, where she would serve as his concubine. After 10 years of war, Troy's famous walls had finally been breached. With its king now gone and its great heroes defeated, Troy would now lay at the mercy of the Greeks. Fleeing from the streets of Troy, Cassandra would find refuge in the temple of Athena, watching in fear as her fellow citizens were slaughtered before her eyes. But unfortunately, the Greek warrior Ajax the Lesser had spotted Cassandra hiding, soon entering the temple himself and violating her in front of Athena's statue. Disgusted at the act performed in her sacred temple, as Ajax went to board his ship, Athena would strike it with a bolt of lightning, causing him to fall into the sea, where Poseidon would drag him to a watery grave. But for Cassandra, things would only get worse. With Ajax now gone, Agamemnon would claim her as his concubine, where they would return to his home in Mycenae. However, Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, was not pleased with her husband lying with another woman, with her grabbing an axe and butchering Cassandra in a jealous rage. But Cassandra would not be the only one to feel Clytemnestra's wrath, having never forgiven Agamemnon for sacrificing their daughter Iphigenia to restore the winds. Clytemnestra would now take her revenge. Waiting until Agamemnon had fallen asleep, she would sneak into his bedchamber, plunging her dagger into his heart, with the king facing the same gruesome death he had inflicted upon their daughter. Of the few Trojans to escape, the most significant would be Aeneas. Leading a small group of survivors out of the burning city, they would cross the Mediterranean, eventually landing on the shores of Italy. Beginning a new life, Aeneas and his followers would populate the land, with his descendants Romulus and Remus, founding a new city called Rome. Finally reunited with Helen, Menelaus would return home to Sparta, where the two would rule as king and queen once again. When their time came, they would pass on to the next world, where they would spend eternity on the Isle of the Blessed. However, although some were able to return home, and others were able to forge new beginnings, for one hero in particular, a long and dangerous journey awaited. For Odysseus, the most cunning of the Greeks, would have to travel for 10 long years, where he would face the most terrifying creatures known to man. The Odyssey had just begun.